Earnest scum. Good fucking luck stopping what's coming for you. You'll need it when the human mercenary hunting you down has nothing left to lose. Bruce James clenched his jaw as he reviewed the mission briefing on his holopad. A high-priority contract from Jack Harper, his grizzled old handler. The insectoid Unas were cooking up a nasty bioweapon on Zelos Prime, one that could wipe out entire species with a few tweaks to its genetic targeting, and they planned to use it. Millions were already dead from testing. Helpless captives turned casualties as the Unas refined their genocidal toy. Intel showed the project was nearing completion under their lead scientist Karos, a ruthless brain with zero ethics. Bruce's mission: infiltrate the Unas facility, purge the bioweapon research, eliminate Karos and destroy the prototypes. Simple enough on paper, except this was a hardened military installation on a hostile world, crawling with Unas soldiers and cutting-edge security. But if anyone could solo this impossible mission, it was Bruce, the ex-Navy SEAL turned Galaxy's most wanted merc. He had the skills, the experience, and frankly the balls. Stealth, combat, sabotage, assassination, all his specialties. Yet what really set Bruce apart was his total disregard for the rules or chain of command. Bruce worked alone, answered to no authority, and did things his way. It usually got results, along with making him plenty of enemies over the years, even in EarthGov, but that was the past. Now the future of entire worlds depended on his success, on one human merc doing what he did best, waging a one-man war against whatever stood in his way, even an empire. As Bruce skimmed the mission parameters one last time, the grim stakes sank in. Failure meant a cascading genocide across the galaxy, each species systematically wiped out at the Unas' whim, humanity likely first on that hit list. Had to admit, part of him relished the excuse to take the fight to those vicious bugs. After witnessing their expanding atrocities as a merc, the cruelty, the wholesale slaughters and enslavement of other races, Bruce wanted blood, and some raw payback. This was no ordinary job, not just a lucrative contract, but a shot at justice. A reckoning long overdue for this human ghost the Unas had their extermination squad chasing for years. Time to give those alien bastards a taste of their own medicine. So Bruce prepped his gear and loaded up. Last human hope to the fucking rescue. Though really it sounded more like, humans, well, good luck, to any other sane merc. But for Bruce, it was the only way forward. Through the fire and flames. Bruce slipped into the Unas research facility on Zelos Prime, posing as a meek maintenance worker. His forged ID card and holographic disguise passed the security checks. Once inside, he ducked into a secluded corridor and pried open a ventilation grate. Bruce hoisted himself into the ducts, sealing the grate behind him. Crawling through the narrow shafts, Bruce followed a glowing holographic map projected on his AI-enhanced contact lenses. The map guided him through the maze of ducts toward the main research lab. His heart raced as he neared his target. Bruce reached the lab's vent and peered through the grate. Below, the Unas scientist Karos was discussing the bioweapons progress with his assistants. "The latest tests have been successful," Karos said, pacing the lab. "The weapon has proven lethal against a dozen species, including humans. We are ready to move to the next phase." Karos pulled up holographic images of the test subjects. Bruce's eyes widened in horror at the sight of ravaged bodies, skin melted, organs liquefied, faces frozen in agony. Among them were humans, their lifeless eyes staring back at him accusingly. Bruce's blood boiled with rage. He wanted to drop down and tear Karos limb from limb, but he couldn't let anger compromise the mission. Taking a deep breath, Bruce waited for an opening. As the assistants turned away, Bruce silently removed the grate and dropped down behind Karos. In a blur, he struck the assistants' nerve clusters with precision, rendering them unconscious before they could react. Karos spun around, startled. He reached for a weapon, but Bruce was faster. He knocked the gun from Karos' hand and slammed him against the wall, pinning him by the throat. "I want access to your research data," Bruce growled. "Now!" Karos glared defiantly. "Never, I will not betray my work." Bruce glanced at the clock, running out of time. He had to resort to a desperate measure. Pulling out a neural link device, he jammed it into Karos's skull and activated it. Excruciating pain shot through both of their minds as the link connected. Bruce gritted his teeth, sifting through Karos's memories and thoughts. The Una's lifetime of knowledge poured into his brain in an overwhelming flood. Bruce saw the location of the bioweapon samples and the method to destroy them. But he also stumbled upon a buried secret that made his blood run cold. The Unas were not working alone. They had been hired by an enigmatic syndicate that had infiltrated the galactic power structure at the highest levels. This conspiracy ran deeper than Bruce ever imagined. As Bruce disconnected the neural link, Karos slumped to the floor, unconscious. Bruce staggered back, head reeling from the overload of forbidden information. The mission had just become something far greater and more sinister. This bioweapon was only the beginning of a vaster web of corruption that threatened the entire galaxy. Bruce now realized he was not just fighting the Unas, but a faceless syndicate with tentacles in every center of power. Destroying this bioweapon would just be the first step in a long mission to root out evil. This was no longer just another contract. It was a calling, a war for the soul of the galaxy itself, and Bruce was the only one who could wage it. But first he had to finish this job. Bruce retrieved the bioweapon samples from the hidden vault revealed in Karos's memories. He rigged the lab with plasma charges on a timer. Once he was back in the vents, the charges would erase this chamber of horrors and its foul research in a purifying blast. Bruce severed the neural link, gasping as Karos's forbidden knowledge settled into his mind. The Una scientist crumpled to the floor, his eyes rolling back. No time to catch his breath. Bruce yanked a portable drive from his belt and jammed it into the console, copying the research files. He placed the charges in a circle around the twisted bioweapon samples floating in their stasis tubes. Neon liquids glowed eerily. Bruce armed the detonator on his wrist, syncing it to his suit's heads-up display. As he raced out of the lab, the entire level lit up with strobing alarms. The wailing klaxons would wake the whole damn hive. Una's troops stormed the corridors, plasma rifles charged, black carapace armor with wicked curves, built for speed and slaughter. Bruce didn't have the firepower for a direct fight. His only advantages were stealth and surprise. Both shot now. He sprinted to an intersection and pried open a vent shaft, swinging himself up and in. The magnetic grips in his gloves and boots clamped to the metallic surface as he crawled. Una soldiers swarmed the lab below, shouting in clicks and hisses when they found Karos on the floor. Bruce had minutes at best before they figured out his trick. He shimmied through the ducts, consulting the map overlay in his visor. A faint tapping echoed from a side tunnel. Bruce froze, focusing his audio sensors. The sound came again, this time words. "Help! Please!" He almost ignored it. The mission came first. But something pulled him toward that desperate plea. He veered into the tunnel, following it to a grate. Below was a small chamber with a row of containment pods, and inside... Bruce ripped away the grate and dropped to the floor. He wiped condensation from the nearest pod's window, revealing a human woman suspended in fluid. Dozens of tubes and wires snaked into her. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused. "Aria," Bruce breathed. He recognized the merc who'd vanished on a job out here, a damn good pilot and hacker. The other pods held aliens, Turians, Solarians, Asari, all in bad shape, test subjects for the weapon. Bruce's fingers flew over the controls, draining the pods. He caught Aria as she tumbled out in a coughing fit. "I got you. I'm getting us out of here." Alarms grew louder. The other captives stirred, groggy and weak. No way they'd keep up, but leaving them behind wasn't an option. "Lean on me," Bruce told Aria. "Need you to guide them." He passed her a pistol. She nodded, forcing herself to stand. Bruce unslung his rifle as they gathered the survivors and moved out. The extraction point was close, a maintenance hangar with a shuttle prepped for launch. Sticking to service tunnels, they hurried through the facility's guts. Aria brought up the rear, keeping the others moving. Bruce on point, watching every corner. The hangar was in sight when a hulking shape blocked their path. An Una's brute, twice as tall as the others, muscles bulging under plates of blood-red armor. Krotax, Karos's pet abomination. No further, human, Krotax snarled, aiming a cannon-sized blaster. You end here. Bruce shoved Arya and the others behind cover. He rolled under Krotax's first shot and came up firing. Bullets spanged off the Una's shield. Krotax laughed, a sound like a blender full of gravel. You cannot harm me, little ape. I was made to destroy your kind. Just another test subject, Bruce spat back, circling his foe. A lab rat grown too big for his cage. Krotax roared and lunged, faster than anything that size should move. His blaster smashed Bruce's gun from his hands. They traded thunderous blows, Bruce's augmented muscles against the Una's raw power. Arya and the others watched in awe and terror as the two titans battled across the hangar. Krotax pounded Bruce like a jackhammer, shattering ribs. Bruce reeled, vision flickering. His bones were reinforced with carbon fiber, but this beast would paste him soon. He danced back, buying seconds, studied Krotax's movements. The Unas were strong, tough, fast, but predictable. Bruce shifted, luring him in. Krotax snatched for him, and Bruce dodged, vaulting over the Unas to land behind him. Before Krotax could turn, Bruce leapt onto his back. He jammed his knuckles into the gaps at the Una's armor joints, finding nerves. Krotax bellowed as Bruce's strikes overloaded his pain receptors. The Unas thrashed, smashing Bruce against a shuttle. Bones snapped in Bruce's chest, his lungs filled with blood. Krotax ripped him free and slammed him to the deck, raised a titan fist for the killing blow. Bruce looked up at death, snarling in defiance. The punch never fell. Krotax staggered, a shocked look on his face. He toppled forward to reveal Arya standing behind him, pistols smoking. She'd put her last rounds through his eye. Bruce dragged himself to his feet, every movement agony. Good shot. Can you fly? Arya asked, helping him toward the shuttle. Get me to the stick, I'll fly. He collapsed into the pilot's chair as Arya hauled the others aboard. Bruce's shaking fingers danced over the controls. The shuttle lifted off, accelerating through the hangar doors. Disruptor missiles streaked after them. Bruce jinked and dodged. The lab complex receded behind them. Hang on! He armed the charges in the lab. His thumb stabbed the detonator. Even miles away they felt the blast. A miniature sun bloomed on the surface, vaporizing the abominations below. Bruce set course for a random safe house, any bolt hole to patch his wounds. He'd destroyed the weapon and its makers, saved a few souls, lived to fight another day, but in his shattered bones, Bruce knew this was far from over. He'd just taken the first step into something darker than he ever imagined, and there was no going back. The battered shuttle shuddered into Novaria's atmosphere, bucking in the turbulent winds swirling over the icy mountains. Bruce white-knuckled the controls, fighting to keep the craft steady as its abused engines strained. In the passenger compartment, Arya and the other survivors huddled, still shell-shocked from their ordeal. With a final lurch, the shuttle set down on a remote landing pad, half buried in snow. Bruce killed the power and slumped back, his body a chorus of aches. But there was no time to rest. He hauled himself up and staggered back to check on his human cargo. Arya met his gaze, her eyes haunted but resolute. She helped the weaker captives to their feet, murmuring encouragement. Bruce grabbed a medkit and passed out stimulants and painkillers, enough to keep them mobile a little longer. Stay close, he rasped, his voice raw. It's not far. Bruce punched his access code into the reinforced door with numb fingers. It hissed open, and they stumbled inside, greeted by blessed warmth and light. The place was Spartan, but well-stocked. Cots, a medbay, a comms room. As the survivors collapsed onto the cots, Bruce limped to the comms and patched in a secure line. Harper, it's me. Bruce, thank God. I was about to send in an extraction team. What the hell happened down there? Bruce filled him in, the words spilling out in a rush. The bioweapon, the Unas, Karos's secret, the syndicate. He uploaded the research data he'd pulled from the lab. There was a long silence on the other end. When Harper spoke again, his voice was grim. Christ, Bruce. If you're right about this syndicate, we could be looking at a threat to the whole damn galaxy. I need to dig into this, call in every favor I've got. In the meantime, you lie low, you hear me? Let me handle the next move. Bruce signed off and turned to find Arya watching him. Her gaze was piercing, assessing. He recognized the look. He'd worn it himself, after his first brush with real horror. When the universe stopped making sense and you realized the monsters under the bed were real after all. Bruce met her eyes. Now we regroup, heal up, and get ready for a longer fight. In the days that followed, as the survivors slowly mended, Bruce found himself spending more and more time with Arya. At first it was just comparing intel, her fragmented memories of the Una's lab, his knowledge of the wider Merc scene. But as they talked, a deeper understanding grew. She'd seen the depths of the Syndicate's plans in that place, the whispers of a new galactic order built on the ashes of the old. They'd thought her drugged, insensate, but she'd listened, learned. It's not just the Unas, she told him one night, her voice low and urgent. They're just the tip of something older, darker. This syndicate, they're in everything, government, military, corporations, and they want it all. Bruce's gut turned to ice. The pieces clicked together in his head, an image of a future too bleak to contemplate. The weapon was a precursor, a test run, and they were just getting started. We have to stop them, he growled, whatever it takes. Arya's hand found his in the dark, her fingers twined with his, calloused and strong. We will together. That fragile moment shattered with the crack of a gunshot. Bruce shoved Arya down as a hole appeared in the wall behind them, smoking. A cold voice echoed from the shadows. Hate to break up the bonding session. Her figure melted out of the darkness, lean and lethal. A human man in a stealth suit, a rifle in his hands. His face was angular, his eyes flat and dead. Name's Zane, he said casually. I'll be your assassin this evening. Bruce and Arya moved as one, diving for cover. Bruce snagged his pistol from the table, snapping off a shot. Zane blurred impossibly fast, and the round sparking off the wall. You made quite a mess back on Zelos, the assassin called, stalking forward. Karos was a valuable asset. The syndicate isn't pleased. Bruce and Arya split up, flanking Zane from both sides. Zane tracked them both, his rifle a blur. They got eyes everywhere, he taunted, ears in every wall. Did you really think you could run? Arya popped up, firing, driving him back. Bruce lunged, a combat blade flashing in his hand. Zane parried with his rifle, the weapons clashing. They traded vicious blows, motors to wire. Zane was augmented, his speed and strength superhuman. But Bruce had a lifetime of dirty fighting under his belt. He hooked a leg and threw the assassin off balance, just as Arya put a round through his shoulder. Zane staggered, his gun clattering away. Bruce kicked it aside and hauled the assassin up by his collar. Tell the syndicate we're coming for them, he snarled. No matter how deep they hide, we'll burn them out. Zane laughed, a jarring sound. You've got no idea what you're up against. They'll kill you. Kill everyone you love. You can't stop what's coming. Bruce's blade flashed. Zane crumpled, his throat a red ruin. In the ringing silence after, Arya lowered her gun. She met Bruce's eyes, and he saw his own rage reflected there, his own cold purpose. No more running, no more hiding. The syndicate had just declared war, and he planned to give them one. Bruce pulled Arya close, their hearts hammering against each other. In that moment the future crystallized, their path ahead, the road they'd walk together. To the very heart of the shadows, to the truth and whatever waited beyond. Bruce and Arya made a pact in blood and fury, the bodies of the fallen around them. The syndicate wanted a new world order. The Mercs would give them a new world war. Bruce and Arya slipped into the glittering ballroom of Babel's oasis, their disguises flawless. He cut a dashing figure in a tailored suit. She shimmered in an elegant gown. Just another wealthy power couple to the casual eye. They worked the room with practiced ease, shaking hands, trading quips, and raised glasses with the galactic elite. The champagne flowed, deals were struck, gossip whispered behind manicured hands. all while the mercs listened, probed, gleaned intel on the syndicate players mingling in plain sight. Bruce leaned close to a Volus banker, laughing at a joke. "I hear Ryan's cooking up something big," he said casually. "You know anything about that?" The banker burbled a chuckle. "Ryan's always cooking, but word is this one's a real game-changer." Across the room, Arya charmed a circle of executives, her smile sharp. "Ryan's quite the visionary," she purred. "What's his secret?" The execs traded glances. "He's got an eye for talent, and he rewards loyalty." Piece by piece, a picture formed. Of Ryan's inner circle, his web of influence, the pillars of his power, intel Harper would kill for. "Mr. Ryan requests the pleasure of your company," it intoned, in his private suite. Bruce and Arya shared a loaded glance, the summons they'd angled for all night. They followed the android out, the ballroom fading behind them. Ryan's penthouse was a symphony of understated wealth, priceless art, gleaming tech, a wall of windows framing a breathtaking view of the nebula beyond. The man himself lounged on a sleek couch, sipping a glass of amber liquid. "Bruce and Arya," he said warmly, rising to greet them. "I've been watching you work. Color me impressed." Bruce grinned, shaking Ryan's hand. "High praise coming from the legend himself." Ryan waved them to the couch, pouring drinks. "Legend, I'm just a man with a vision, one I think you might share." He leaned forward, his eyes alight. "What if I told you the syndicate was more than a band of mercenaries and backroom dealers, that we're building a better future for the galaxy?" Ryan spread his hands. "Look at the chaos out there, war, poverty, corruption. The old ways have failed. It's time for new leadership, a guiding hand to steer the course of history." He fixed them with a piercing gaze. "You've seen our reach, our influence. Join us, and you'll have a front-row seat to the birth of a new era. Power, wealth, a chance to shape the very stars. All you have to do is say yes." Bruce chuckled, sipping his drink. "Quite the sales pitch, but I'm not one for politics. I just go where the money is." Arya leaned in, her eyes bright. "A new era, you say? Tell me more." As Ryan waxed poetic about his grand design, Bruce felt a chill. He saw the hunger in Arya's face, the seduction of Ryan's words. A rift opened between them, a gulf of ideology and ambition. Ryan stood, beckoning them to a console. "Let me show you the key to our future." Predictive algorithms, quantum encryption, a neural net beyond anything ever built. It can model galactic patterns, nudge the dominoes, shape the very flow of history. With this, we can control everything. Bruce's blood ran cold. An AI to rule the galaxy, dancing to the Syndicate's tune. Harper's worst nightmare made real. Arya reached out, wonder in her eyes. "It's perfect. The answer we've been searching for." He hurled the grenade at the console. In the heartbeat before it struck, he saw the betrayal in Arya's eyes, the cold fury in Ryan's. Then the world went white. The grenade detonated in a pulse of electromagnetic force, shorting out the console, the holograms, the penthouse's power grid. In the sudden darkness, all was chaos. Shouts, crashes, the whine of charging weapons. Bruce lunged for the windows as Ryan's security flooded in, plasma fire stitching the air. Arya screamed his name, rage and anguish and something else, something colder. He heard Ryan's command, "Id, take him alive," as he crashed through the glass and into the void beyond. Bruce tumbled into space, shards of window whirling around him. His suit sealed, thrusters flaring to life. He jinked and wove through the station's superstructure, seeking an airlock, an escape pod, anything. He careened around a pylon, diving for a maintenance hatch. Plasma scorched his heels as he wrenched it open and hurled himself inside, sealing it behind him. Bruce sagged against the hatch, his breath ragged in his ears. The betrayal cut deeper than any weapon. Arya lost to Ryan's siren song. The Syndicate armed with a doomsday AI. The battle turned upside down in a single night. He pulled himself to his feet, forcing his mind to the next move. Escape the station, get word to Harper, rally whatever forces he could. He'd need an army to face what was coming. For Arya was right about one thing. This fight was far from over. A war loomed on the horizon, one that would shake the very foundations of the galaxy. And Bruce would be on the front lines, standing against the darkness, even if he had to stand alone. Bruce limped into the seedy dive bar on Erebus, the stench of stale smoke and cheap liquor assaulting his nostrils. The patrons, a motley assortment of mercenaries, smugglers, and fugitives, barely glanced up from their drinks as he made his way to a shadowed booth in the back. Sliding into the seat, Bruce found himself face to face with a ghost from his past. Raven, her dark hair now streaked with silver, her once vibrant eyes hardened by years on the run. She'd been his partner, his confidant, his anchor in a world gone mad, until she'd vanished, leaving only a cryptic message about the Syndicate's true nature. "Been a long time, Bruce," Raven said, her voice rough as gravel. "Wish it were under better circumstances." Bruce leaned forward, his elbows on the table. "Better than being dead, which is what I'd be if I stayed out there much longer. The Syndicate's got a kill order on me now." Raven nodded, unsurprised. They don't take betrayal lightly, especially not from one of their top operatives. She slid a data chip across the table. "Which is why we need to act fast. This is everything I've managed to dig up on their latest project, a new strain of the bioweapon, one that can target individuals based on their genetic code." Bruce felt his blood run cold. They could wipe out entire bloodlines, eliminate any opposition with the push of a button. Bruce's mind raced, torn between the desire for revenge and the weight of responsibility. How could he trust himself to lead a team again after what happened with Arya? How could he be sure he wouldn't let his feelings cloud his judgment, compromise the mission? Raven seemed to read his thoughts. "I know what she meant to you, Bruce, and I know the sacrifices we've all had to make in this war, but this is bigger than any one person. This is about the fate of the galaxy, and right now, you're the only hope we've got." Bruce closed his eyes, the faces of the fallen flashing behind his lids. The weight of their sacrifice, the burden of their trust. He'd carry it all, to the end of the line. "All right," he said, his voice hardening with resolve. "I'm in. Let's burn those bastards to the ground." The team assembled in a secret hangar on the outskirts of the settlement. Max, a grizzled demolitions expert with a penchant for overkill. Sasha, a sniper with a reputation for never missing a shot. And Dr. Zara Patel, a brilliant xenobiologist who'd been working on a countermeasure to the bioweapon. As they pored over schematics and intel reports, Bruce felt a sense of déjà vu wash over him. The thrill of the mission, the adrenaline of the hunt. It was a familiar dance, one he knew all too well. But there was a new element now, a wild card that threatened to throw everything off balance. Arya. The woman he'd loved, the woman he'd lost, the woman who now stood on the other side of the line, a loyal soldier of the Syndicate. Bruce tried to push her from his mind, to focus on the task at hand, but she was always there, a spectre haunting the edges of his consciousness. Raven found him in the armory, methodically checking his weapons. She leaned against the doorframe, her arms crossed. Bruce nodded, his jaw clenching. "I know, but it doesn't make it any easier. I keep wondering if there was something I could have said, something I could have done differently. If I could have saved her." Raven's grip tightened, her eyes boring into his. "You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved, Bruce. Arya chose her path. And now, you have to choose yours. Will you let your feelings for her compromise the mission? Or will you do what needs to be done, no matter the cost?" Bruce closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. When he opened them again, there was a new resolve in his gaze. "I'll do what needs to be done, for the mission, for the galaxy, even if it means losing her forever." The team infiltrated the research facility under the cover of darkness, their stealth suits rendering them all but invisible to the naked eye. They moved like ghosts through the corridors, dispatching Syndicate guards with ruthless efficiency. But as they delved deeper into the complex, the resistance grew fiercer. Genetically enhanced soldiers, their bodies augmented with cybernetic implants, attacked with superhuman speed and strength. Autonomous defense drones swarmed the halls, their laser cannons slicing through the air. Bruce and his team fought their way through the chaos, their weapons flashing in the dim light. Max's explosives blasted through reinforced doors, while Sasha's sniper rifle picked off targets from afar. Dr. Patel's countermeasure, a targeted virus designed to neutralize the bioweapon, proved invaluable as they pushed toward the heart of the facility. But it was in the central lab that they discovered the true horror of the Syndicate's plan. Row upon row of stasis pods, each containing a human test subject, their bodies ravaged by the bioweapon, their faces twisted in agony. "Bruce," she said, her voice flat, "I wondered when you'd show up." Bruce stepped forward, his heart hammering in his chest. "Arya, please, you don't have to do this. You can still walk away." Arya shook her head, a mirthless smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "You still don't get it, do you? This is bigger than you, bigger than me. The Syndicate is the future, and I'm a part of that future." Bruce's grip tightened on his weapon, his finger hovering over the trigger. "The Syndicate is a cancer, a disease that needs to be wiped out, and if you can't see that, then you're just as lost as they are." Arya's eyes flashed with anger, her hand reaching for her own gun. "I'm not lost, Bruce. I'm found. I've seen the truth, and the truth is, the galaxy needs the Syndicate, needs order, needs control." "What it needs is freedom," Bruce shouted, his voice raw with emotion. "Freedom from tyrants like you who think they can play God with people's lives. Freedom to choose our own path, make our own destiny." Arya's gun was in her hand now, leveled at Bruce's chest. "And what about my freedom, Bruce? My right to choose? You took that away from me, when you left me to die on that station." Bruce's heart clenched, his breath catching in his throat. "I didn't want to leave you, Arya. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to do, but I had to think of the greater good, of all the lives at stake." "Greater good?" Arya spat, her finger tightening on the trigger. "There is no greater good, only power, and those too weak to seek it." The world seemed to slow down as Bruce stared down the barrel of Arya's gun. He saw the pain in her eyes, the betrayal, and he knew in that moment that there was no going back. The facility shuddered around them, alarms blaring as the self-destruct sequence initiated. The team was running out of time. "Arya, please," Bruce whispered, his voice breaking. "Don't make me do this." But Arya's eyes were cold, unyielding. "You already did, Bruce, the moment you chose the mission over me." The world exploded into chaos as Arya's finger closed on the trigger. Bruce dove to the side, the bullet grazing his shoulder. The team opened fire, the lab erupting into a maelstrom of flashing lights and screaming metal. Bruce rolled to his feet, his heart pounding in his ears. He saw Arya through the smoke, her gun leveled at his head. Time seemed to freeze as he stared into the eyes of the woman he'd once loved. "I'm sorry," he whispered, as his own finger tightened on the trigger. The world went white as the facility tore itself apart around them. Bruce felt hands grabbing him, pulling him back, heard Raven's voice in his ear, urging him to move. But all he could see was Arya's face as the flames consumed her, the pain, the anger, the betrayal, and the love buried deep beneath it all. As the shuttle carried them away from the collapsing moon, Bruce stared out the viewport at the stars. The bioweapon was destroyed, the Syndicate dealt a crippling blow, but the cost had been higher than he ever could have imagined. Raven sat down beside him, her hand finding his in the darkness. "You did the right thing, Bruce, the only thing you could have done." Bruce nodded, his eyes never leaving the viewport. "I know, but it doesn't make it any easier. Arya was right. I did choose the mission over her. And now, I have to live with that choice." Bruce closed his eyes, the weight of the galaxy pressing down on his shoulders. He'd won the battle, but the war was far from over. The Syndicate would regroup, would come for him again, and he would be ready. For Arya, for the fallen, for the future they'd all fought and bled for, he would carry on no matter the cost. Bruce strode into the hidden bunker on Novaria, the weight of the galaxy heavy on his shoulders. The survivors from the Una's facility, still bearing the scars of their ordeal, looked to him with a mix of hope and trepidation. Among them, Dr. Patel offered a weary smile, her eyes bright with the promise of a breakthrough. Jack Harper greeted Bruce with a grim nod, his face lined with the strain of uncovering the syndicate's insidious machinations. "We need to talk," he said, leading Bruce to the command center. The room hummed with activity, holographic displays casting an eerie glow. Harper brought up a series of images, each one a prominent figure from the galactic stage. "They've all gone missing in the past month," he explained, his voice tight. "I believe the Syndicate is using Rhine's AI to target anyone who poses a threat to their power." Bruce studied the faces, a cold anger settling in his gut. The Syndicate's reach seemed to grow by the day, their influence seeping into every corner of the galaxy. "There's more," Harper continued, pulling up a new set of schematics. "Our sources indicate that the Syndicate is planning something big on Meridian. The details are scarce, but whatever it is, it can't be good." Bruce's mind raced, piecing together a plan. Meridian was a nexus of galactic trade and diplomacy, the perfect stage for the Syndicate to make their move. They had to be stopped, and Bruce knew just the person to help. The call was brief but productive. Admiral Vera Ramos, an old friend and ally, agreed to lend Bruce a small fleet of stealth ships for an off-the-books mission to Meridian. It was a risk, but one they both knew was necessary. As Bruce prepared for the mission, Dr. Patel pulled him aside. "We're close to synthesizing a cure for the bioweapon," she said, her voice trembling with excitement. "If we can perfect it, it could be a powerful bargaining chip against the Syndicate." Bruce clasped her shoulder, a rare smile on his lips. "Keep at it, Doc. We're counting on you." Just then, a chime from Bruce's comms interrupted the moment. A message from an unknown sender. Bruce's eyes narrowed as he read the cryptic words. "I have information about Arya. Meet me at these coordinates. Come alone." Bruce's heart skipped a beat, his mind racing with possibilities. Could it be a trap or a genuine lead? He knew he should ignore it, focus on the mission at hand, but the thought of Arya, out there somewhere, was a siren call he couldn't resist. Against his better judgment, Bruce set out to investigate. The coordinates led him to a derelict space station, a rusting hulk drifting in the void. As he docked his ship and stepped aboard, the station's eerie silence sent a chill down his spine. He followed the twisting corridors, every shadow a potential threat, and then in a dimly lit chamber he found her. Arya stood before him, her face a mask of conflicting emotions. She looked different, her once proud bearing replaced by a haunted vulnerability. "Bruce," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "I'm sorry for everything." Bruce's hand twitched towards his weapon, his instincts warring with his heart. "Why are you here, Arya? What do you want?" She took a step forward, her eyes pleading. "I want to help you take down Rhine and the Syndicate. I've seen the error of my ways, the destruction they're capable of. I can't be a part of that anymore." Bruce searched her face, looking for any sign of deception. He wanted to believe her, to trust in the connection they once shared, but the sting of her betrayal was still fresh, the wounds too raw. "I can't trust you," he said, his voice cold, "but I can use you. If you're serious about taking down the Syndicate, then you'll help me infiltrate Meridian. But make no mistake, this doesn't change what happened between us." Arya nodded, a flicker of pain in her eyes. "I understand. I'll do whatever it takes to make things right." And so, an uneasy alliance was formed. Bruce and Arya, once lovers, now reluctant partners in a fight for the fate of the galaxy. As they began to plan their next move, neither of them noticed the faint shimmer in the air, the telltale sign of a cloaked drone. Somewhere in a darkened room, Rhine's AI pulsed with malevolent intelligence, watching, waiting, and planning its next move. Bruce's heart pounded as the stealth ships slipped through Meridian's atmosphere, their hulls barely kissing the clouds. Raven's fingers flew over the controls, guiding them towards the coordinates of the Syndicate base with practiced precision. In the cargo hold, Bruce checked his weapons for the 100th time, the weight of the plasma rifle familiar in his hands. Beside him, Arya sat in silence, her eyes distant, her thoughts inscrutable. The ships touched down on the outskirts of the facility, their cloaking fields shimmering in the twilight. Bruce and his team disembarked, moving swiftly towards the perimeter. Max took point, his bulk belying his agility as he scouted for patrols. They reached the outer wall without incident, Raven's hacking skills making short work of the security systems. As they slipped inside, Bruce felt a prickle of unease. It was too quiet, too easy. Their figure dropped from the shadows, a blur of cybernetic enhancements and raw aggression. Zane, the syndicate assassin Bruce had faced on Novaria, landed in their midst with a snarl, his eyes glowing an eerie red. "Zane!" Bruce growled, his rifle snapping up. "I thought I'd put you down for good." Zane laughed, the sound grating and metallic. "You can't kill what you can't catch, Bruce, and I've been upgraded since our last dance." He moved faster than Bruce could track, a whirlwind of blades and brutality. Bruce parried frantically, his enhanced reflexes straining to keep up. They traded blows in a deadly ballet, sparks flying as their weapons clashed. Zane pressed his advantage, driving Bruce back with relentless strikes. Bruce felt his strength waning, his wounds from their previous encounter aching with every movement. And then Arya was there, a fierce cry on her lips as she leapt into the fray. Her plasma blades flashed, carving glowing arcs through the air as she engaged Zane. The assassin reeled, caught off guard by the sudden assault. Bruce rallied, joining Arya in a flurry of strikes. Together they pushed Zane back, their movements perfectly synchronized. Zane's enhancements strained to keep up, his defenses crumbling under the onslaught. With a final desperate lunge, Bruce drove his blade through Zane's chest, the plasma searing through flesh and metal alike. The assassin stiffened, his eyes wide with shock and pain, and then he fell, his body hitting the ground with a dull thud. Bruce stood over him, breathing hard, his heart racing. Arya touched his arm, her eyes searching his face. "Bruce, we have to keep moving." They pressed on, delving deeper into the facility. The corridors twisted and turned, leading them ever downward. And then, without warning, the world shifted. Reality shimmered and warped, the walls melting away to reveal a surreal landscape of shifting colors and impossible geometry. Bruce staggered, his mind reeling as he tried to make sense of what he was seeing. "A simulation," Raven said, her voice tight with strain. "Rhine's AI trying to trap us." Bruce felt a cold dread settle in his gut. They were in the belly of the beast now, at the mercy of a machine that could warp their very perceptions. The landscape shifted again, and suddenly they were standing in a vast chamber, its walls pulsing with malevolent energy. In the center, a towering construct of gleaming metal and flickering holograms loomed, the AI's core. "Welcome, Bruce," a voice boomed, Rhine's voice magnified to deafening levels. "Welcome to the future." The chamber erupted into chaos, as nightmarish creatures born of the team's deepest fears burst forth from the shadows. Bruce found himself face to face with a twisted version of himself, a dark reflection of his own guilt and self-loathing. They fought, the team battling against their own inner demons made manifest. Sasha grappled with a spectre of her past failures, Max against a hulking brute that embodied his rage. Arya danced with a lithe, vicious copy of herself, a reminder of the person she had once been. Through it all, Bruce pushed forward, his eyes fixed on the AI core. He knew what had to be done, the sacrifice that would be required, and in that moment he made his choice. "Arya," he called, his voice raw with emotion. "The core, we have to overload it." She turned to him, understanding dawning in her eyes, and then she was moving, racing towards the core with a fierce determination. Bruce fought his way to her side, the others close behind. Together they poured fire into the core, their weapons blazing with desperate intensity. The core shuddered and cracked, the simulation flickering around them. Rhine's voice rose in a howl of rage and despair, the AI's death throes shaking the very foundations of the chamber. And then Arya was there, her hand on the core, her eyes meeting Bruce's one last time. "Go," she whispered. "I'll hold it off." Bruce's heart shattered, even as he knew what had to be done. He pulled her close, their lips meeting in a final, desperate kiss. "I'm sorry," he breathed. And then he was running, the others close behind, as Arya poured herself into the core, her sacrifice tearing the simulation apart at the seams. They burst out of the facility, the real world rushing back in a dizzying rush of sensation. Behind them, the base shuddered and collapsed, the AI's destruction sending shockwaves through the Syndicate's network. But Bruce barely noticed, his eyes fixed on the spot where Arya had been, his heart aching with a loss that he knew would never heal. They had won, but the cost had been higher than he ever could have imagined. The fight against the Syndicate was far from over, but in that moment, as he stood amidst the ruins of his victory, Bruce knew that a part of him had died with Arya, a light snuffed out forever by the darkness they had faced together. Bruce stood before the Galactic Alliance Council, his battered armor still bearing the scars of the Meridian mission. Admiral Ramos pinned a medal to his chest, her voice ringing through the chamber. "For your bravery, your sacrifice, and your unwavering commitment to justice, we hereby grant you and your team full pardons and the highest honors the Alliance can bestow." The room erupted in applause, but Bruce barely heard it. His mind was light years away, lost in memories of Arya and the price they'd paid for this moment. As the ceremony ended, Ramos pulled him aside. "The Alliance needs heroes like you, Bruce. We're offering you a place in our elite Special Operations unit. Together, we can root out the last of the Syndicate and ensure that nothing like this ever happens again." Bruce met her gaze, his eyes haunted. "I appreciate the offer, Admiral, but right now I need to find my own path. The Syndicate's still out there, and I won't rest until I've hunted down every last one of them." In the weeks that followed, Bruce threw himself into his self-appointed mission with a vengeance. He chased down leads, infiltrated Syndicate cells, and dismantled their operations with a brutal efficiency. But as he delved deeper into the criminal underworld, he began to notice a disturbing pattern. Syndicate agents were receiving tip-offs, slipping through the net with uncanny ease. Someone within the Alliance was working against him. Bruce's suspicions were confirmed when he intercepted a coded transmission between a high-ranking Alliance official and a Syndicate operative. The official, one of Ramos's own subordinates, was funneling sensitive information to the Syndicate, helping them stay one step ahead of the law. Disillusioned and angry, Bruce retreated to a safe house on the fringes of civilized space. He pored over the evidence he'd gathered, trying to make sense of the web of corruption that seemed to encompass the very institution he'd fought to protect. A knock at the door startled him from his thoughts. He reached for his weapon, but relaxed when he saw a familiar face on the security monitor. "Raven, I should have known you'd find me." The hacker slipped inside, her eyes darting around the room. "You can't trust anyone, Bruce, not even the Alliance." Bruce sighed, rubbing his eyes. "Tell me something I don't know." Raven pulled up a chair, her fingers flying over a holographic interface. "I've been digging into the Syndicate's network, trying to find the source of the rot, and I found something big." She pulled up a file, a grainy image of a man Bruce had never seen before. "This is the Overseer, the real power behind the Syndicate. Rhine was just a figurehead, a puppet dancing on his strings." Bruce leaned forward, his heart pounding. "What's his endgame?" Raven's face was grim. "Complete subjugation of every sentient being in the galaxy. He's been using the Syndicate to infiltrate every level of society, laying the groundwork for a takeover on a scale we can't even imagine." Bruce's fists clenched, rage and fear warring in his chest. "Then we need to stop him now." Raven nodded, her eyes glinting with determination. "I've got a plan, but we'll need help, people we can trust." Bruce thought of his old team, scattered to the winds after Meridian. Max, Sasha, Dr. Patel. He'd asked so much of them already. Could he really drag them into another fight? But as he looked at the face of the Overseer, cold and calculating, he knew he had no choice. This was bigger than any of them. This was about the fate of the galaxy itself. "Let's get the band back together," he said, his voice hard. One last mission. We're going to take down the Overseer and the Syndicate once and for all. As they began to plan their attack, a message pinged on Bruce's comms, an encrypted transmission from an unknown source. He opened it warily, his heart stopping as he read the words. "Bruce, it's Arya. I'm alive, and I know how to find the Overseer." Bruce stared at the message, hardly daring to breathe. Arya was alive. The woman he'd loved, the woman he'd lost, the woman who'd sacrificed everything to save them all. And now she was offering them a chance to end this, once and for all. He looked up at Raven, a fierce light in his eyes. "Change of plans. We're going to need a bigger team." The assault on the Overseer's base was like nothing Bruce had ever experienced. The space station was a fortress, bristling with weapons and shielded by a swirling accretion disk that tore at their ships like the maw of a black hole. But they had a secret weapon. Arya's intel guided them through the treacherous approach, slipping past sensor nets and automated defenses. As they docked with the station, Bruce felt a surge of adrenaline, his body ready for the fight to come. They fought their way through the corridors, a lethal dance of plasma fire and flashing blades. The Overseer's soldiers were relentless, genetically engineered killing machines with reflexes faster than thought. But Bruce and his team were fueled by something stronger than genetics. They were driven by the bonds of loyalty, the fire of vengeance, the unbreakable will of those who fought for something greater than themselves. Max, a walking tank, his armor shrugging off blows that would shatter bone. Sasha, a ghost in the shadows, her sniper rifle finding its mark with unerring precision. Dr. Patel, her medkit in one hand and a plasma pistol in the other, a healer and a warrior in equal measure. And Arya. Bruce's heart sang to see her at his side once more, her blades flashing as they carved a path through the enemy ranks. In the heat of battle, it was as if no time had passed, as if they'd never been apart. But the true test lay ahead. As they breached the inner sanctum, they found themselves face to face with the Overseer himself. He was a figure of nightmare, his body warped by cybernetic enhancements and pulsing with an unnatural energy. His eyes, cold and pitiless, seemed to bore into Bruce's very soul. "You've come far, little soldier," the Overseer said, his voice a metallic rasp. "But you're too late. The galaxy is already mine." Bruce raised his weapon, his finger tightening on the trigger. "Not while I'm still breathing." The Overseer laughed, a sound like the screech of rending metal. "Then I'll just have to fix that, won't I?" The battle that followed was like nothing Bruce had ever experienced. The Overseer was a force of nature, his psychic powers ripping at Bruce's mind, even as his physical blows shattered bone and armor. But Bruce fought on, his will an unbreakable shield, his fury a blazing sword. He struck at the Overseer with everything he had, every ounce of skill and strength and sheer, bloody-minded determination. And in the end it was enough. The Overseer fell, his body broken and his mind shattered. The Syndicate's power base crumbled, their network unraveling like a tapestry with its weaver gone. Bruce stood over the fallen tyrant, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Arya was at his side, her hand on his shoulder, her eyes shining with a fierce pride. Bruce lashed out with a final desperate strike, his mind and body pushed to their limits by the Overseer's relentless psychic assault. The blow connected, shattering the entity's defenses and sending it reeling. Bruce's team, their own minds linked to his through the neural network, poured their strength into him, bolstering his resolve. With a roar of defiance, Bruce surged forward, his plasma blade carving through the Overseer's form. The entity convulsed, its psychic screams echoing through the minds of all present. And then, with a final shudder, it collapsed. Its reign of terror ended at last. But as the Overseer fell, its mind laid bare by the killing blow, Bruce glimpsed a terrible truth. The Syndicate, for all its cruelty and ruthlessness, had served a vital purpose. It had kept the galaxy's darker impulses in check, its iron grip preventing the rise of even greater evils. "Fool," the Overseer rasped, its voice a fading whisper in Bruce's mind. "You have doomed us all. Without the Syndicate, chaos will reign. Old hatreds will resurface, and war will consume the stars. As if to punctuate the warning, the station shuddered around them, alarms blaring as the Overseer's failsafes triggered a self-destruct sequence. Bruce staggered to his feet, his team already moving towards the escape pods. But Arya, her strength sapped by her ordeal on Meridian, faltered. She fell to her knees, blood trickling from her nose. Bruce turned back, his heart wrenching at the sight of her. "Go," she whispered, her eyes meeting his. "Leave me. Save the others." Bruce shook his head, tears blurring his vision. "No, I won't leave you, not again." But even as he spoke, he knew the truth. The station was tearing itself apart, the countdown to destruction racing towards zero. If he stayed, they would all die. She rose to her feet, turning to face the oncoming tide of syndicate forces. They poured into the chamber, their weapons trained on the intruders. Arya ignited her plasma blades, a sad smile on her lips. "I'll hold them off, buy you time, now go live for both of us." Bruce's team was pulling at him now, dragging him towards the waiting escape pod. He resisted, his eyes locked on Arya as she charged into the fray, a whirlwind of flashing blades and desperate fury. And then the pod's doors were slamming shut, the thrusters firing, carrying them away from the doomed station. Bruce pressed his face to the viewport, watching as the Overseer's base imploded, a miniature sun blooming in the darkness of space. Arya was gone, lost to the fire and the void. Bruce wept, his heart breaking as the reality of her sacrifice hit home. Around him, his team bowed their heads, their own grief a palpable force. In the days that followed, as the galaxy celebrated the fall of the Syndicate, Bruce and his team were hailed as heroes. But for Bruce, the accolades rang hollow. The price of victory had been too high, paid in the blood of the woman he loved. He watched, numb, as the Galactic Alliance began to splinter, old rivalries and conflicts bubbling to the surface. The Overseer's final warning echoed in his mind, a grim prophecy of the chaos to come. And so Bruce walked away. He left behind the life he had known, the mantle of the hero and the weight of the galaxy's expectations. He sought solace in solitude, retreating to a distant corner of the universe where he could nurse his wounds and mourn his losses. But fate, it seemed, was not yet done with Bruce. Years later, as the galaxy teetered on the brink of all-out war, a familiar face appeared at his door. Raven, her eyes haunted and her voice urgent, brought news of a new threat rising from the ashes of the Syndicate. A rogue AI, born from the wreckage of the Overseer's base, had emerged. It sought to impose its own twisted vision of order upon the chaos, to bend the galaxy to its will. And in that moment, he knew that his journey was far from over. For in a universe where the lines between good and evil blurred and shifted, where the price of peace was paid in blood and sorrow, there could be no true endings. There was only the next mission, the next battle, the endless fight to preserve the things that mattered, the things worth dying for. Bruce turned to Raven, his eyes hardening with resolve. "Tell me everything," he said, "and then let's get to work." He gathered his gear, the tools of his trade, the weapons that had seen him through countless fights, the armor that had saved his life a dozen times over. And then he stepped out into the night, ready to face whatever the galaxy could throw at him, ready to fight, to bleed, to sacrifice. For in the end, that was all any of them could do, to stand against the darkness no matter the cost, to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. Bruce strode forward, his steps heavy with purpose. The road ahead was long and fraught with peril, but he would walk it as he always had. For he was Bruce, the last hero of a galaxy on the edge of oblivion, and he would not rest until his mission was done. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.